Hello everyone and welcome to the 5th episode of the Gay Mind and Sociology podcast. I hope you're having a good week. Actually, I had planned to publish this episode on Saturday, but to be honest, it was delayed to do some rush. Not to be an excuse, but it's the rush of modern life. As Zygmunt Bauman mentioned, liquid modernity. We want to do so many things that sometimes you find it difficult to adapt, but I will go into this issue of flow in more detail next week, and let's leave it here for now. I hope you're all managing to deal with the problems you face in your own life. I do hope this podcast will be a short break in the chaos. Let's come to today's topic. I mentioned in the last episode that this week we're going to talk about Karl Marx, and it was a nice coincidence because our episode was timed to be on the 1st of May, the Day of Labor and Solidarity. Maybe it was not a purposeful chance, but sometimes people can make the right timings without realizing it. So, Karl Marx. Karl Marx is not only a philosopher, but also a profound thinker who explains the functioning of society through production and labor. His ideas help us understand not only the period in which he lived, but also the systems in which we still live today. According to Marx, history is a history of class struggles. Humanity has produced from the very beginning. It has survived through production, but along with production too, social divisions began. As time passes, what we call culture also changed at a high level, both material and morally. But let's not make a mistake. Unlike Max Weber, Marx did not include culture and included materialism in material consequences. Now, I would like to talk about his life, even if only a short one. When Karl Marx is mentioned, the first thing that comes to our minds are concepts such as seriousness, revolution, and class struggle. But he did not only work on these concepts, but also studied philosophically. So he was born on 5th May 1818 in Trier, Germany, and he came from a Jewish family. His father was a wealthy lawyer, and whether he was to follow in his father's footsteps or for what reason we would never probably know, but he, like his father, began his first path in law and went to Bonn and then to Berlin to study law. So in 1843, he married Jenny I, who was at least as much of a thinker as he was. So Jenny was also known as a woman of great thought and courage. However, at first, he was already starting to turn towards Hegel's ideas beyond law. Speaking of Hegel, he was one of the most important names in German philosophy at that time. He used to say that history has a sense of logic and that what we call development is dialectical. If you say what dialectics is, the understanding of dialecticity is a concept that describes the conflict between opposites in philosophy and the development process arising from this conflict. In its simplest version, we can think of it as thesis and antithesis. According to him, events developed with opposites and progress with the third trilogy of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. There were young people who followed the idea of Hegel, and these young people were known as young Hegelians, and Marx was one of them. Due to political repression at the time, Marx emigrated to Paris with his wife in 1844, where he met Engels. Friedrich Engels was also a young, wealthy, and system-critical thinker at the time, and his father was a capitalist who owned textile factories in Germany, and so Engels grew up in the system and saw its injustices. So the industrialization going on in Manchester, England, with its child laborers and long working hours as well as a misery opened his eyes. After Marx met Engels and read his book, The Condition of the Working Class in England, Marx was seriously influenced by this book, like us. Marx, who was influenced by this book and gradually got closer to Engels, both saw that the system was not actually founded and wrote the Communist Manifesto together with Engels at exactly this time. But the fact that he was influenced by Adam Smith is such thoughts should not be overlooked. One of the most fundamental things he realized in London was that it was called capitalism is not really an economic system, but also something that gnaws at the soul of human beings. And after these thoughts, he added materialism to material consequences and moved away from Hegel's thoughts with a completely different inversion dimension. He saw people working in factories for 15 hours a day, but he did not accept that the rich also lived in money. He argued that the historical process in the books he had read up to the point actually meant something different. The history was shaped not by the ideas in people's heads, but by how they lived their lives, that is, by economic conditions. This idea is characterized as historical materialism. What is meant to be said here is what determines history is not the ideas, but the way of production, that is what was, who produced them, who earned them, and what worked or who worked. What is meant to be said here is what determines history is not the ideas, but the way of production. So, let's say everyone in a village lives on agriculture. Then the organization of that village is based on the soil, seasons, and landowners. But then someone comes along, brings a tractor, and the yield increases. Then someone says that, okay, there is a tractor, and classes are formed, the owner of the tractor, and the laborer, the peasant who loses the land. So here, what Marx realizes is societies transform as their relations of production change. In other words, human history is not a battle of ideas, but a struggle for production. According to him, what lies at the basis of a society is the economic system. He calls this infrastructure. That is how people work in a country, what they produce, who is rich, who is poor, who has the money. That is the infrastructure. The economic base determines the superstructure. And what is the superstructure? Here he states that spiritual culture is shaped by this, and that is this also orientated towards the classes, and he argues that the religion is also opium. Every great transformation in history is a result of a class conflict. Rich and poor, slave and master, lord and peasant, boss and laborer, a constant tension, a constant strife. So he divided human history into 5 main stages: primitive communal, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and communism. And he famously said that bureaucracy therefore produces, above all, are its own gravediggers. So this script is written by him and Friedrich Engels. In capitalism, Marx believed people become alienated from the work they do, the products they make, the co-workers, and even themselves. Work is no longer creative or meaningful. It just becomes something we do to survive. So, think about it. You wake up, you go to work, sit in front of a screen for hours, and you don't even know exactly what you're doing or for whom. You come back tired, empty, and this is called alienation. According to Marx, the value of a product comes from the labor used to make it. But the boss doesn't pay the full value of that labor. The worker gets a part, the rest is called surplus value, and the boss keeps it. The system is built on this exploitation where the rich get richer by taking more of the value created by workers. So Marx wasn't just angry, he wanted to understand how society works and offer a vision for a fairer, classless world where people live with dignity. So today we talked about how Marx was commenting about history and his critique of capitalism And for sure, as I mentioned, his view of history. So he taught us to see history in a different way, and that's all for this week, dear listeners. I hope I've made Karl Marx's world of ideas a little clearer and more relatable for you. But of course, it doesn't end with Marx. And next week, we'll go a bit further. We'll talk about modernism and the critical ideas that came after it. And there is a very important school of thought coming up, the Frankfurt School. What is critical theory? Where is modern society going? And how does the culture industry shape the way we think and live? We'll dive into all of that next week. So stay tuned, keep questioning, and take care, and see you next week.